Okay, now I think is a good time, since we've got the castle exploding, and which is all great, let's do some work on the catapult. What we're missing right now on the catapult is we're missing the rubber string that launches the spoon up into the air, which is going to be connected between these two sticks. So let's start by adding some rubber spring some knots here, some rope loops. We're going to do that simply with a rectangle spline, and we're going to change this plane here to XZ. We're going to move this guy up. We're going to center him on our little cube here. We're going to scale him down by pressing scale tool, clicking and dragging an empty space. And then here on the rectangle settings, we're going to reduce the width down. And we're going to add some rounding. So let's reduce the width a bit more. Let's reduce the height. It seems about right. Also, when you adjust these, you can scroll wheel through them, or you can hold the control key. The alt key for smaller increments, or the shift key for really big ones very quickly. So it goes straight in tens. If you just drag, it drags in single digits and ones, twos. If you hold the alt key and drag, it'll drag in decimal values. As you can see, this one moves while holding the alt key. Okay, let's drag it in a bit more. Let's move it over. Okay, let's get another spline, just a little circle. Make its radius like 5. Let's move into the rectangle, press tilde-X as in to zero everything out so they're next to each other so we can see them. We scale it down a bit more. Now let's make holding the alt key, let's make a sweep nerve, and the circle will be in the sweep nerve if it's selected, and then we drag the rectangle in and we reorder them to get them in the right order. Now right now the circle is way too big, so let's change this to uniform and number of points. That's pretty solid, so we don't have too much of them. And rectangle do the same thing. Let's change this to uniform, and it's a good value. Okay, now the circle, I think that's a pretty solid one, but let's make it editable. Let's go to the side view here, press the S key to get the circle, go to point mode. Let's get these points and let's scale them in, just like this. I think that looks a bit better. Okay, now let's get our rectangle here. Let's also make it editable by holding pressing the C key or this button here. And let's also adjust its points a bit. Let's move these guys. Scale them out a bit here. So maybe scale these points out a bit. Just be careful to click on the red button. That's about right. Okay, let's make a yellow material for this. Double click, yellow, maybe tone it down a bit. And let's apply it to the sweep nerve. And let's move this guy down a bit. You'll notice this thing is where the circle is, so if you want to press tilde-4, no, it doesn't work. Cut. Okay. So now we need like 3 of these or 4 of these going up the stairs. Let's press Ctrl-Alt-C and move this guy up, and Control-Drag, and Control-Drag. And the reason we do this is the first time we press Ctrl-Alt-C, which makes a new instance object, and then we can just Control-Drag the instance object up the up the pillar. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to actually make all these editable. No, we're not. We're going to do this first. I'm going to show you. We're going to add to this rectangle, we're going to add a MoGraph noise effector. Holding the shift key, we're going to add a random effector. And we're going to call it tilde-X, and we're going to zero it out. Now in our attributes panel, we're going to change the deformer from deformation to points. Not quite what we wanted. So let's change the parameter here to 1, 1, 1. Okay, as you can see, we get this kind of effect, which isn't quite what we want. Let's make this to 0.5 and 0.5 and 0.5. Actually, we don't need to deform it in this. Let's change them all to 0 for now, and then just see which ones we want to change. So if we click and drag this one, that's not what we want to change. This one, yeah, this one's good. This one I want to put to 1, and this one, no, we don't want to. So basically, we just want to affect this coordinate, which makes them move up and down. And now, there's one problem that happens with this deformer. No, actually, I don't think it does. If we're on noise, we're fine. Yeah, it doesn't move. Sometimes I like to use the effector option noise, which in this case, I think it's too big. Let's make the scale down. There, see, I like it because now it affects all of them, but it affects them differently. Like it doesn't, they're not exactly the same, which is an effect that I like. But the problem with this guy is now that if we move this, as you can see, that it moves through the noise. The reason is that this noise applies through space, like as in, it's not just random per object, there's a noise field, and then the object gets deformed by that field. That's why they're all different. So this makes it easier to apply when you have instances, so they're not all the same. But the problem is we animate this catapult and it moves, it kind of moves all these things with it. So firstly, I want to increase the number of, on this rectangle, I want to increase the number of points. No, that's, well, maybe I just want to put these, all of these LG into a null and into a hypernerves. Yeah, that's nice too. Let's change the display here to garage shading. Yeah, it's sweet. Okay, let's increase the size of this noise a bit. There you go. I like it like that. And now the thing is we have to right click on this and we have to click current state to object and we have to delete the existing one. That was not, yeah, we have to delete the existing one, and then there we have it. And now we can move these guys through space and no ugly animation. It's odd how this one doesn't get selected. Anyway, oh. Odd behavior, but anywho, so now we got these guys. But you just saw a problem. Now they're all the same, because as soon as we make that noise editable, then they just feed off the spline. So let's undo this. Come on, come back, noise. There we go. Let's delete this new spline. So what we have to do is we have to make all these guys editable first. And then we have to right click on this thing, and they each have one. So we got to right click, go to select all these splines, control clicking them, didn't select one, and we're going to go current state to object, and then we're going to hit delete, and now we have what we wanted. And if we move them, they don't animate. Although I want to close some of these gaps, so let's select all these splines here. Let's go to point mode, and right click and be somewhere empty and go magnet. Now it's too big, so we want to make it smaller. So here, let's make the radius like 5 meters. There you go, much better. Make it like 15. Now I want to move these points up, and I want to move these points down a bit, just so they're kind of more stuck to each other. And you can rotate. If you ever rotate into a bad place, you can press Ctrl-Shift-Z, which undoes your camera move, not anything in your scene. So there we have it. Maybe let's move this guy up a bit. And we're going to want the rope coming out of the middle here. So let's move this one up. Don't always click the right one. Let's move this one down, and this one down a bit, because that's where our rope is going to be coming out from. Okay, So we got this done, which is pretty nice. And let's call this rope on pillar. Now in the viewport, we don't need 3 subdivisions. We don't even need, we just leave it at 0 to be honest. Okay, now let's get to actually making the rope in between the sticks. There's lots of ways you can do this in Cinema 4D, but in this case I think I'm going to use a tracer object with nulls. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some nulls. Make a null. Let's move this guy up. Whoops, too far. And let's move him inside here. Stop getting away from me. There you go. Let's go to our top view. And we want like this null here. Then we want another null here. And we want a third null here. Nope, that's not the way we want them to be. This way. Okay, and what this does, what these nulls will do, let's do it on a simple example. Let's just keep 3 nulls for the time being. Let's have this null here, and then let's make another null here. So let's call this guy left, and call this guy right, and then we control click and drag into the middle and call this null middle. Let's arrange them in the right order. And now let's hide our forests because we don't need them in our viewport. And let's move this middle null into our, just behind our spoon here. And now what we're going to do, I don't get why my viewport is kind of glitching. We're going to make a tracer object. So let's go mergraph and tracer object. Now, a tracer object usually traces the movement of nulls. But it also actually connects nulls. So if we throw these nulls into here, in the right order, and we go connect all elements, as you can see, we get a spline between them, but we have to place this middle null under our catapult spoon. Now here's a useful hint. Right now I can't see both of these at the same time, but what you can do is you can press a little plus button and you get another object manager. So now we have middle here selected, and we go find where our spoon is. So here it is, our spoon handle. And we can just get this middle and drag it under our spoon handle. And now, when we play back and forward, you can see that spline there, or is it our tracer object, animates together with the spoon. Saying thunk, like a spring. Nice, right? But the problem here is if right now we drop this guy into a sweep NURBS and we hold the shift, drop a circle into it, and we make the whoops. And we click and drag with the scale tool to make the circle very small. Let's close this. Even smaller. We don't really get what we want. Even if here we go to tracer object and we change this guy to cubic and intermediate points to uniform. It's still, like, it's better, but it's not quite what we want. Let's drag our yellow material on it. Because we want this rope to kind of go in here and then come out. And, you know, we don't want it to intersect. So that's why we're going to be getting this left point. And we're going to click and drag, control drag. And we get left 1. So let's get our tracer open, attributes. Let's lock this guy down for a second. Press this little arrow to drop it down. And let's add the left 1 behind. And as you can see now, we have this kind of, let's go, you'll see from the side view. It kind of does this springy thing, which is, I think mostly it's the problem that our trace object is set to cubic. Let's change it to like a schema. That's better, but still it kind of goes out far because here, what we need is we need another left 1, this left, and we need another left. So let's move this guy a bit in closer and control click and drag another one. And let's throw the last left 2 underneath. There you go. See, now you get the right material, the right kind of. And let's move this left 1, let's move them all in order here. Let's move this left guy up a bit. There you go. And now when we drag through our timeline. By the way, I'm dragging through my timeline without clicking on it by holding the J key and clicking and dragging in the viewport. So that's a useful little shortcut. So yeah, now we got kind of a more realistic behavior of this thing. So what we want to do now is do the same thing for this one inside the spoon. Let's go to our spoon. Where's our spoon? Let's click on it. With our model tool, click on the spoon. There it is, middle. Let's drag this guy over a bit. Let's drag another one like here. And let's drag this guy into the middle. Make sure these are in the right order. If they're not in the right order, it really doesn't work. So there you go. I think we get another middle here, so let's drag another middle. Let's put him here and put him in between the two middles. There you go. So that looks about right. So when we press play, there you go. That's how we want it. And now we know for the other side we want the same thing. So let's go back to our right and let's control click and drag, control click and drag these guys above the right one. There you go. Oops. And we obviously want this object here, so let's select this object, press Ctrl Alt C. Oops. Select this new instance. Let's drag it over. Let's rotate it around holding the Shift key to make it snap, and let's put it into place. As you can see here, not quite in the correct location, so let's get our right one and let's move him up a bit and out. Go, and now we're going to press J. See, it's our animation working right there. And we have a little springy spring. There's also the last thing you can do is with a sweep nerve. It has, if we unlock this, it has a bunch of really useful details here, which you can use, for example, scale. So let's say, for example, we want this guy to be thinner. Let's hold the Control key and make him thinner here, while he's still stretched out here. But let's also add another one point here to make it. And let's align these so they're not so. This guy's a bit maybe too thin. But just so we, he's thinner around. Maybe stretch him out a bit. Anyway, it's something you should play with to get something that you like, it's Control Shift Z if you lose what you're looking at. And now obviously we can move the little middle nulls. Where are they? Oh, middle nulls. Middles. We can grab all these middles and let's move them up a bit. And not quite the way I like it, but it's just, I thought I'd mention this because it's a really useful thing for shaping your curves. Now let's delete these. Start again. Let's Control click and drag this here. Because I really want it to be stretched here. I want it to be squashed here as well. There you go, it's a bit irregular. So yeah, there you have it. Yeah, basically, this is what I was talking about. We have a little stretchy string there. And there we go. So there, now we have an actual launching mechanism and the castle explodes in the background.
And now we will record our catapult's wheel animation. Now, as of this moment, our catapult is standing there and then it shoots at about the 10th frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these initial 10 frames a drive-in. So we're going to get the catapult, Actually, no. Let's first, because we want the wheels to spin. I want them to spin. So let's experiment on a new file. Let's see how we get the wheels to spin. So let's just make a quick block, make a little square, and let's add a wheel to it. Cylinder. There you go. By the way, I just scroll through with my wheel through these to pick the right one. You know, my mouse, you could click and pick the right one. I just like to scroll up and down until I find the one that I have. Okay. So we have a wheel. Let's change this display to garage shading. And we have a platform. So let's position the wheel. Let's position it above the ground so it's not intersecting. Let's get our block about here. Okay, so our first instinct is to use in the connector thing, there's a thing called wheel suspension, because you think we're making a wheel. It's good. It's like a combination of a spring and a hinge, and there's also a twist deformer so you can steer them. But for this case, I think it's overkill. I think our regular hinge is more than enough. So, firstly, you notice when you deselect it, it disappears from the viewport. I like to see these, so display always visible. Okay, so let's place the hinge where we think it'll logically be. So we think it'll be about in the middle here, wherever the middle of the wheel is. And we probably want to rotate it around, holding the shift key to snap it to 90 degrees. And then we want to move it down the middle. Seems about right. Let's go into the connector, let's go object, and let's put our object and cylinder in here. And we probably want to add some rigged bodies to the cylinder. We want a collider body on the cube, I guess, because we want to move it ourselves. We don't want it to just fall over. And I want a collider body on the plane. So let's see what happens when we move this thing. Nothing happens. That's because these connectors only work when there's animation. So if we put a keyframe here at the beginning, and then we go to frame 20, and we move the cube over here, put another keyframe, now go back to 0 and we press play, then you'll see they move together. But you'll see right now the wheel isn't spinning. The reason for that is, let's move our 0 point, no, we're not going to move anything. We're just going to delete this keyframe here. The reason for that is because it's not touching the ground. So what we're going to do in the beginning is on frame 4, for example, we're going to move this wheel down this platform. So let's go back to the beginning, let's press play. It seems to have stopped at 50. Why did it stop at 50? Maybe we didn't move it far enough. Let's move it. Keyframe. There, now it works. So press play. That seems about right. Over here it's a bit too low, so let's move this guy up again. Keyframe him there, and let's see what we have. We have a perfectly spinning wheel. And it's always important because we like to experiment on these things, because I remember when I was first making the catapult, my hinge was in the wrong place. Like if we get the hinge and we move it, example, say up here, and we press play, you'll see the wheel doesn't spin because that's where the force is. But at the same time, the hinge doesn't really care about this object that much. You could experiment, for example, deleting the collider tag from it. That doesn't work. But the wheel is still on the hinge. The reason that doesn't work is because the hinge isn't attached to this thing, and you can't keyframe a hinge's position for some reason, from what I found. Maybe you can, maybe it just doesn't. Yeah, you can't keyframe a hinge's position. That's a limitation. So when you want to keyframe a hinge's position, you need a collider body somewhere. And you need a hinge to be attached to it. Then you can put it underneath and it'll move together. So yeah, that's a small issue. Also, don't forget to untick ignore collisions, because sometimes objects won't see collisions depending on how you're using it. So now that we know what we're doing, let's go back to our catapult window. So our collider cube is going to be this object here. Let's scroll down to first active, and it already has a collider tag on it. Or is it dynamics body? No, it seems like collider. Okay, good. So what we're going to do is we're going to keyframe this guy. Now remember, we want this guy to be lower than he was before. So, and this will be at frame 10. So this is where he's going to be at frame 10. So let's press F9, or no, let's just press the keyframe key. Now at frame, we're not keyframing, sorry. We're keyframing the whole catapult object, not just the object. So let's delete the keyframe, we don't really need it there. Let's keyframe the whole catapult object. Actually, there's already a keyframe there, but let's just... And on frame 0, let's move the catapult object back. As you can see, those objects aren't moving with us, so we have to remember, let's not keyframe yet. We forgot to parent a lot of these objects together because, well, we were building the little ropes. So all these write and sweeps and rope on pillars and rope on pillar instances and random, actually the random effector, I don't think it's being used anymore. Oh, that's for the cubes, sorry. Yeah, these are, so we're still using them. These ropes, all of these objects. Let's Alt-G and group them and call this rope. And let's put it inside the catapult. Now let's go catapult and frame 0 and move it back. Ah, there's another object that's missing. This object is not in our catapult object. Okay, now let's move the catapult object back. Seems pretty solid. And let's keyframe its position. Now let's press play. Good. Moves out. Maybe it's a bit too far back. Let's press play. Sweet. So we have it rolling over. Now let's attach our wheel animations. Firstly, they're all symmetry right now, so that's not really going to work for us. So let's get these wheels that are on the other side. Actually, it will work because the other wheels are going to be symmetrical in this. So let's first rotate this symmetry object because it's backwards right now. So we have our actual geometry on the visible side. Okay, so let's now select let's go with the instance first. Let's hold the shift key, make a connector, and zero out its coordinates. So it's where we want it to be. Let's rotate around 90 degrees so we can see what it looks like. Let's move it in between the wheel and the base. Now we got the wheel here. Let's move this out of the wheel. We don't need it inside the wheel. Let's make the wheel a rigged body. Make sure in our connector we need our top base. So connector, we have our top base, and then we have our wheel instance. And now we press play. And we don't get the spinning effect we want. Let's see what could be the problem here. Maybe the collision. Compound collision shape. Nope, not that. Let's turn the symmetry off. Nope, not that either. Let's pull the wheel and the connector out to here. There we go, and it works. Okay, so it doesn't like being in nulls. So let's get this wheel again, and let's also drag it over here. Let's control drag this connector down here. Let's select it. Let's replace the wheel instance with just wheel. Let's give the wheel a rigged body tag. Let's also give it a compound collision shape. And let's press play. Doesn't spin. Let's see what the problem is here. Ah, the connector's in the wrong place. See, we left the connector here. So let's move the connector over here. Let's press play. And there we go. Now we have both of them spinning. I think that one keeps on spinning. Let's give these guys let's turn off their bounce and friction. So bounce is like 5 and friction is 95. Let's press play and see what happens. That one keeps spinning for some bizarre reason. I think it's because it's not low enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to get both these wheels and their connectors, and we're going to just move them slightly so they intersect the ground a bit more. And when we press play, now see, it's the problem, we can't do that. Let's move them back up top so they're not intersecting. Now if we press play, there's nothing happens, but notice they're not shaking. So what we want to do is we want this top base to move just a tad. From the first frame is here, and then on the second frame we want it to move just a little bit down. Oops. Just like the slightest smidge. Now let's not move that, that'll affect the way the catapult looks. Let's just move the actual catapult. Let's get our catapult and let's just move it a bit down. Let's just pull it down and keyframe that location. And when we get to the end, let's also just push it a little bit down, just the tiniest of bits. And let's press play. That one's still spinning. So let's see how far we have to push this catapult down on the 10th frame. Press play. Still keeps spinning. It's an interesting. Maybe it's too far down. See what happens if we move it up. Yeah, they just keep spinning. As you can see, this one isn't very centered. It's spinning in a kind of offbeat direction. So let's undo this. So press play. You can see this one kind of stops. This one still keeps spinning. So let's go back to 0. Let's go to our side view. And let's make sure that our connector, here, our second one, see, it's off center, so let's align it better with the middle of the wheel. And now let's see what happens. Let's press play. Much better. Still have a bit of shaking. I think it's because we moved this catapult too far down. So let's just move it a bit up again. See what we get. Not too far up. I think about here is a good place for it. That seems about right. There's still a bit of spinning, but if it really bothers you in this place, I think, yeah, it just goes down too far. Let's just push it up a tiny bit again, keyframe it. There you go. And the camera will be gone because we'll be focusing on the rock, so it's not so much of an issue. But basically just, it's pushed too far, so it's making it a bit of shake. But the shake is barely noticeable now. So, sweet.